What's up, guys? I'm James Baney, and I'm here with Kyle Larson, and we are getting ready to do a review and then spoiler discussion on the High Republic Race to Crashpoint Tower. Stick around. All right, Kyle. Back again. 2 books that we had to get through, but let's not had to get through.
No,
come on, we're being
it's
nice
a good
here.
problem to have.
Yeah, lots of books. It's always funny when they decide they're gonna do 2 books on the same release date, though. But we'll get into it. But how are you?
I'm doing good. It's very warm here in Portland, Oregon, but getting through it. Staying cool.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hanging in there, man. Hanging in there. And then they've already somewhat sent us the next book. So as soon as we finished up both of these books, we're already working. So we got a full schedule, which reminds me, guys, if you were watching these videos, if you could give us a like and subscribe to the channel, because we do these for all the books that they send us for review and stuff. So it's pretty much every major Star Wars novel that comes through. So yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess we can get started.
Sure.
Just so that everybody knows, we are not going to do spoilers until I tell you we're getting ready to do spoilers. So you can watch this video like a review of the book. We're going to give our scores. We're going to talk a little bit about it in a non-spoiler review. And then there will be a distinct point at which we segue into spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, then you can back out then. But
right.
Let's get started just with a couple book stats, kind of set the timeline. High Republic Race to Crashpoint Tower was released June 29th, 2021, and it was written by Daniel Jose Older, read by Todd Haberkorn, and published by Disney Lucasfilm Publishing, as well as Random House Audio, who did the audiobook. Now, the timeline for this book is after Light of the Jedi, but it's also concurrent with The Rising Storm. That's why they released these 2 books at the same time, because they kind of happen... they actually don't even kind of happen. They literally happen at the same time. You're just getting different characters' point of view on the same scenario or the same event. Right. Just to get it right off, initial thoughts, score. For me personally, my initial thoughts on this book are that it is very similar to Test of Courage. It's obviously aimed at kids. And right. I think one of the biggest things right away is that there's hardly any Jedi Knights, really, or Masters that show up in this book. It feels very much like, oh no, the Padawans are all alone and they got to figure out their way through it. And they didn't just take adult characters and kind of I don't want to say dumbed them down, but you know what I mean? Brought ease of reading to those adult characters. They just gave you all kid characters. Even the one character that is a Jedi Knight is the youngest Jedi Knight of all time at age 15. So it's
Row. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's my initial thoughts on this book, is that it reads very much like a kid's book. As far as a score, just a reminder, I score things based on a 5 is where I was okay with it. It didn't really do anything for me. Anything above a 5 is when I start to like the book. And in this particular case, I gave this book, what did I write? Where did I had it somewhere. I want to say I gave it a 6.7. Yeah.
All right. Nice. We're very close.
Very close on this one. Okay, cool. So then I will let you go ahead and give your score and your initial thoughts. I don't know why it's not showing up on my...
Yeah, no. It happens. I gave it I believe I gave it a 7. Somewhere between a 7 and a 7.5 is kind of where it landed for me. And I really enjoyed it. I actually really liked the fact that it was through the Padawan's perspective. I thought that was really refreshing because, to those who've read The Rising Storm, yourself included, and maybe people watching this video, The Rising Storm is heavy, is really, really heavy. And it is very, there are some younger characters in it, but it relies heavily on people who've had a lot of life experience. And there is, always a bit of cynicism there. There's always a little bit of that. And then these are Jedi, or these are Padawans, excuse me, who are like, incredibly clear on who they are and are very like fresh faced when it comes to the galaxy. Ram's very, I won't get into spoilers, but Ram's very set in the kind of things he likes to do. Lula's very confident in like the path that she's on to become a Jedi as a Padawan and things like that. And then that's totally disruptive by what happens in the book when the NEEL show up. And so watching these Padawans kind of regroup, to me, was like a real strong point of the story. The only reason I didn't score it higher is because I felt that Daniel Jose Older relied a little bit heavier, or a little too heavy, on the material that he's written before in the Star Wars Adventures comics, which are also aimed at kids. But we'll get into that more in the discussion. But that's why I probably would have given an even higher score than I had if it hadn't been for that. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I understand that, because like when I was going through it, there were multiple times when I was like, I feel like they're almost hinting that this story has been told before, and that happens a lot in Star Wars books where like they hint to something like, you fought in the Clone Wars, but I mean, and that's a bad example because everybody knew what was going on, but like I didn't feel like they were hinting at like, wink, wink, did you see our animated show? You know what I mean? I feel like they do a pretty good job at hinting at different things, but it definitely did feel like they were almost like, well, you remember when she was on the planet and they had to get off. They said things like, your most recent NEEL attack, or the recent NEEL attacks on this planet. And like, I don't know, I just had this vibe that like I was missing out on something and there was something else. And when you go and look, you're like, oh, they did tell those stories. So then from that point on, it felt like I was, every time they were aware, or every time they mentioned that other mission, I was constantly aware that like there were these other stories or these other things that were being told. Right. So it did have a little bit of that like, and it's funny too. I didn't feel that way so much about the connection to Rising Storm. It was mostly about the thing, and I think that's because that's Jose writing Daniel Jose Older writing his own stuff, and he's referencing his own stuff there. Let's get into now that we've done that, initial thoughts and score, because like I think we both agree that we like the book, but we just think maybe there was room for improvement in some cases, but then again, it is for young readers, Let's go ahead and get into spoilers then. So from this point on, we're going to talk spoilers. What was your favorite part or favorite thing in this book?
So there's a moment when they return to Crashpoint Tower and they're kind of looking out over, the devastation in Lanisa City as the NEEL have attacked. And this hits Ram really hard because he actually grew up in the city. He was, before he joined as a Padawan, this is his home planet, which is probably a unique thing for, Padawans to be learning, about the Force on their home planet. But so he and Lula both look down on this planet at the devastation. They so badly want to help their friends. They so badly want to go back there and like get in the fight. But then they both realize, because they've struggled with their ambitions, they've struggled with like who they are as Padawans and who they are in the Force. They realize that like they are going to be helping the Jedi. They are going to be helping their friends. They're moving parts in a greater struggle against the NEEL at this moment, and their role is to proceed and kind of go to Crashpoint Tower. I keep messing up the name of Crashpoint Tower, so I had to look at the book. But that to me was really cool, because that is kind of like what everything Star Wars is about to me. Like when you think of the Jedi, or you think of like the good parts of Star Wars, it's people usually like, letting go of their own self and their own plans for everything and realizing they're part of something bigger. So I thought that was a great moment for those characters. And yeah, I think that was mine. How about yours?
I agree. That is a good pick. The thing is that with this book, there's obviously that like, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, but like the reoccurring phase that's very similar to like a place for everything and everything in its place. He keeps repeating that, or some, it's some sort of version of that, or some story that we're all part of the whole, and the whole is part of us or something like that.
Yeah.
Something along those lines, that he has been instilled, or his master has kind of taught him that we are all part of this machine, which obviously is very character to him, very important in his understanding of the Force. So he looking at the situation and saying, this is terrible. We should, we should push the fuel through, or we should do this. And it's like, no, you are just a cog in the motor. Like, it's not your job to make the car run. You just have to do your part. And that very specific thing that you're mentioning is them figuring out that in order for this whole thing to play out the way that they want it to, they have to do their part, which ends up in this book being more significant to the greater battle. It basically means that everything kind of came down to them. The Jedi may have figured out a way to win otherwise, but the way that it plays out is obviously very important, that they got their communications back.
Right.
And my favorite part, it's funny too, it's nowhere near as impactful as what you're saying. I kind of went more with the favorite thing. My favorite thing about this book was Ram's understanding of the Force and how he related to machines. It reminded me kind of like, if anybody's played Final Fantasy X, I know you have, Kyle, the Riku
yes.
character. Like, you have a character who, like, everybody has their kind of specialty, but you have this one character that just fundamentally, like, understands machines kind of thing. And in this particular case, you have a Jedi that kind of fundamentally understands machine. And his ability, as they describe in Light of the Jedi, how the different Jedi see it, some see it as like a forest, some see it as like an ocean, whatever. Ram's sort of explanation of understanding everything is that, like, that symphony or that machine, or whatever, where you are just a part of the whole. And he uses his ability to understand machines in order to not just like push the speeder bike down into the ground.
Right.
Like,
right.
he goes in and through the system and finds the thing, and then he flips the switch that causes the bike to malfunction or whatever. And I'm like, that's such a unique way to use the Force that is beyond just dumb push. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
just, like,
get out of my way. It's more like, I don't know, like, it reminds me kind of Vader, like, using things in the room to hit Luke in Empire Strikes Back. He's using these other things to hit Luke from, like, behind and the side, and he's not even, like, really needing to fight anymore, because he's kind of utilizing the Force in a way that you would think he would just, like, push Luke, but he doesn't. He's, like, using his environment around him. I don't know. I just found the whole concept of how Ram and relates to the Force and his relationships with machines and stuff was my favorite thing about this book. Then we can get into more of the discussion. I have a couple points that I wanted to talk about. You can get started here. Crashpoint Tower, just as a whole, did you find it a little convenient that all of Valo is dependent on this one tower? Did it feel a little Rise of Skywalker-y?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, and I remember thinking that in Rising Storm too, when I was like, wait, how, like, this one thing is affecting communications for everything, around the planet. And yeah, it is a little bit of a convenient plot point, for sure. I thought it was interesting too, because when I first started the book, I was reading through it, and he's like, uh-oh, there's someone there, I better get there. And I'm like, oh, I get it, race to Crashpoint Tower. And then like in a matter of like 5 minutes, he's already there. And I'm like, what is this book? How long is this? He's already there. And it was just kind of interesting that the it's like called Race to Crashpoint Tower, but he in fact goes there first and then leaves. And then like midway through the book is like, we got to go back. Like, it's like lost or something. Totally.
Yeah, I just thought the whole concept of Crashpoint Tower was not only kind of weird and convenient that there's one tower that controls, over the whole planet, but also just that, like the name of the book is Race to This Point, and he's there like in the second chapter or something.
Right. I mean, funny. I think in a lot of Star Wars, you find that like, things like the A-class processor thing in Last Jedi is one thing that I'm always like, wait, you had to be on one ship, like that kind of thing. It's, there's always like kind of Star Wars techie things that get me, they have all these things that can do amazing things, but when it comes down to fundamental things like one specific task, it's like, oh, it can only be this, massive kind of convoluted thing or this like simple thing. So yeah, I
gotcha. Thoughts on the Drengir in this particular book in comparison to where we've seen them before?
I was kind of disappointed that like they were easily swayed. I thought it was interesting that like in the book what happens is that they've made a deal with the Nile to come to the Republic Fair, and basically the Nile are like, yeah, there's plenty of food for you here, and then they turn on the Nile when they find out that food supply is threatened. And I thought that kind of makes them this like, it was interesting that the Jedi were able to negotiate with them, but I wasn't like as terrified of them as I have been in other stories, like in Out of the Shadows and or not Out of the Shadows, sorry, in Into the Dark and the Marvel series by Cavan Scott. They're genuinely like these dreadful creatures capable of possessing these Jedi, and here like they come around these Padawans, and the Padawans are like, hey, they're gonna mess up your dinner, and they're like, wait, we gotta stop everything, and then all of a sudden they turn against the Nile and stuff. So that was another thing that was like a little too convenient for me, and they weren't really effective. It was more like they kind of threw, like they were in the story so that we could learn that like, oh, the Nile know who they are, and they have Drengir spores, and they're spreading them across the galaxy right now. I thought that was kind of like the point, the only reason that they seemed to be a part of the story, because they didn't really seem like much of a threat at any point. So
the exact same takeaway. I felt there was a real dumbing down of this villain. Like in other stories, it's like, well, we have the Nile who are very reckless and calculated, and we have the Drengir who are seemingly very intelligent, but kind of portray themselves as like not totally there,
right.
But as far as like brute force and just like there's mass of them and swarming and they're coming towards you and stuff, felt very scary. But in this book, I was extremely surprised that the solution was just reaching out to them in the Force and being like, hey, can we talk for a second? Like, I just want to spend some time and talk to you. What's your negotiation? What's your contract look like?
Yeah, that.
And they're totally. And they're like, oh, well, we were told we were going to get a bunch of free stuff. And the solution to this was, we're the good guys, right? They're the bad guys. And I was like, I feel like, try to tell this to like Wreath,
Right.
It's like it's not that simple.
No.
And ultimately them being like, oh, okay, well then if we were lied to, then we'll just switch sides, and then the Drengir go after the other people. I was like, first of all, the Drengir should not be on sides. They should just be like eating anyone near them. And then they not only like side with them, but then the Drengir like get in a ship and fly with her like so long, like off into the sunset. I'm like, this is weird, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I think they're telling news stories where maybe there's more to the Drengir than we realize, but I'm like, I don't know. It just feels to me like they're kind of like dumbing it down or making these villains like seem a little more silly in this kid's book than they would normally be in like an adult novel or something.
Yeah, I thought so too, because in the other times that we've met them, they're pretty terrifying. And that's the thing, that's a very good point that you make. They don't distinguish, because a part of the Marvel series right now is the Jedi are actually like allying with the Hutts to take on the Drengir, because they both realize like they don't care who our enemy is, whatever side you're on. They just want to eat their meat,
Yeah.
Everything's meat to them. That's kind of their gimmick or their thing.
Yeah. It seemed very weird at points when it just seemed like they could be like, why don't I just eat both of you?
Right.
Like that seems like a simple-minded thing. They're like, look, I don't care why I'm here or whose side I'm on. I'm just going to eat the Nile, and then I'm going to eat you too. Like there's like 3 of you sitting here, and you all seem trapped. I don't really think that's going to conflict with future investments or whatever. It's like, it just feels like there's like 3 slices of pizza sitting in a room and nobody's looking. And they're like, I'm just gonna eat this. Yeah, they should just have eaten those Padawans. But anyway, we can move on past the Drengir. I wanted to ask you, because I know that you have been reading the adventure comics, and I know we're not here to talk about that, but like you mentioned earlier, it's very important potentially that you're reading those to get kind of the full scope of this is going on. My next point is Lula and Zine. What were your thoughts on this relationship? Because to me, this was the first time I'd ever come across them, and I'm sitting here kind of stepping back and being like, why is there a non-Padawan character like or non-Jedi character like hanging out, And they even kind of touch on it a little bit in the book where like, it's weird. Yeah, but we're going to keep doing it. And I'm like, what's the dynamic here?
So, yeah, that was a big complaint of mine, or not big complaint, a criticism, is that, he relied really heavily on his work. And, well, I do appreciate the fact that, that he took the opportunity, the author I'm referring to, took the opportunity to expand on these characters using this medium, because there's only so far you can go into a character's head when you're in a one comic issue trying to tell multiple stories. So I appreciated that, but especially with the Lula Zine stuff, because when they meet, it kicks off the story. Basically, the first issue is these 2 characters meeting when the Padawans arrive in the midst of a Nile attack on Zine's home planet. Zine's been raised her whole life to fear the Jedi, or to fear Force users, but specifically the Jedi. So it's a huge thing when she goes over. She actually joins the Padawans in fighting the Nile and uses her ability through the Force, which she's hidden most of her life, to help, push this Nile ship away from the planet. And that's how they all kind of meet together, which is not really touched on in the book. They really kind of skim over that. And I think, if there would have been one chapter maybe where they kind of went over that and introduced that, it would have added a little more weight to the fact that Zine is very conflicted. She still doesn't know if she wants to stay with the Padawans and the Jedi, and conversely, the Padawans and the Jedi don't really know what to do with her. They, not like she's just, somebody to be like handled around or whatever, but they're like, the Jedi don't really think it's a good idea to train her as a Jedi, but they also don't want to just like, send her adrift in this new galaxy. She doesn't have a home, which you do, that really hits home in the fact that the Nile attack, you don't learn that in the comic books, that it basically laid waste to the planet and she can't go back. There's not really anywhere for her to go. And she's also lost her best friend, which they don't really talk about in the book, who's joined the Nile and is actually Martian Rose. He's become Martian Rose, like second in command, but you don't really meet him in either of these books. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's cool that there's that backstory there.
I'm actually just finding that out now too. Okay. Like I had no clue.
Totally. Yeah. I would recommend people it's a great comic as well. It's one of my favorites that's out right now in the Star Wars titles. And it really does provide a lot of weight to this book. A lot of weight to the characters.
I think it provides weight to adventures, because to me, there was a while when I was reading them and then I was just like, these are just silly stories that don't have anything. This is like, one time Rey was like, I went to go to buy a mop, and then she bought a mop, and then it was like, what?
Exactly,
these are just like a day in the life of said character, and really they hold no relevance to the story. And now, like, looking into them and seeing how it connects to these books and stuff, I'm like, I feel like you would open this up and just immediately be like, oh, this is all of the other story that I didn't get in the book that I just read now. And it's probably pretty easy to fly through it because you're already familiar with all the characters, and you can kind of get a visual on what maybe some of them even look like. Like if, you when you're reading a book, sometimes they're like, oh, this character's Shabababa, you know, and you're like, I don't know what a Shabababa looks like. And then you like, you know, like you're just reading the book and you're like, oh, that's what a Shabababa looks like, you know?
Right.
So you're like, okay, you get some visuals and a better understanding, which immediately is going to help you with the book as well. So yeah, I think I'm very interested in reading this particular line of adventures because it ties in so heavily. I mean, that's obviously not the only thing this ties into. Rising Storm, the other book as well. Did you feel good about how that was kind of happening concurrently with the story? Juxtaposition to adventures.
I did. I mean, I feel like with, you know, the fact that it's a middle grade reader, you know, it could have easily been seen as a companion novel to the Rising Storm, and I feel like it connected enough to have it be relating to that, or be kind of a tandem book with that, but it's its own story, and it doesn't just like, you know, every chapter isn't just like some echo of, you know, it's not a junior novelization of the Rising Storm. It's its own book. It's, you know, it's connected to it, and there's even like chapters where you read them in the Rising Storm and they're right here in Race to Crashpoint, but it's just from a different perspective. It's not like it's dumbing it down or anything. Like the exact same things happen. You just, maybe you don't know who a couple people in the room are, but you know who the important people like Ty Yorick are. So, and you know, it's nice that she kind of comes into the story and then she goes right back out into what she was doing in the Rising Storm. There's not this like massive side adventure that kind of makes it unbelievable, because if you read the Rising Storm, she's, you know, pretty much on the ground in the battle the whole time. But here, you know, you see that she kind of helps these kids out for a second, and then she goes back to what she was doing in the Rising Storm rather than some elaborate side adventure. So
yeah, as far as the connections to Rising Storm, which I did read, I thought that Rising Storm barely ever mentions this book. Like it's very, very lightly touched on that maybe this is happening or something along those lines. But this story felt very much like it was happening. It was very clearly happening at the same time as the other event. And I think we've seen stuff like that too, like in the sense that, like, I don't know, like the Marvel movies won't mention Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or talk about anything that's happening in that show, but Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would be like, we got to do everything that's happening around the movies, you know, and those major events are kind of thing. And it felt like that. But I would say in a good way. And you actually said something to me privately, just like on a text message or something, that I was like, and you kind of mentioned it here, but you didn't go into full detail. This book feels like lost chapters of the Rising Storm. I think that in another universe, there could be just a long version of the Rising Storm where in between chapters, they just, instead of cutting from what's happening with this character to what's happening with this character, they just stick in, here's a chapter of what was happening with this Padawan and you know, and he was on his journey. And if you just played it out a very specific way, I feel like you would just be watching Lord of the Rings extended version. And you're just like, this is just the entire Republic Fair event, and it's all just laid out, like it's all edited together. I feel like that would be pretty easy to do. But that being said, it's almost like if that was the official version, they just said, this is a little long. Let's pull out all the stuff with Ram, you know, and just like kind of make it its own story. And it is a kind of what it is. So yeah, I think that they did a pretty good job. We got this question with Test of Courage and Light of the Jedi, and I'll say the same thing again. You have to read Rising Storm first. Don't read.
Oh yeah.
It would make no sense to read this one and get the vibe on it and then go into the heavier Rising Storm, because I don't know. This book is reliant on the other one. That book is not reliant on this at all.
Right.
If that means anything.
No, it's, well, that's the thing. I think, like, you could experience, I mean, you would be able to understand the story without reading The Rising Storm, but you wouldn't get the weight of what's going on in the background. It wouldn't give you the urgency. You'd just be like, oh, those pesky NEEL. But in the Rising Storm, like the things that are happening, well, you know, that's a whole other review, but it's so devastating and so terrible that you're like, you understand the urgency of these kids to try, or to these Padawans to try to help everything. So
that's, and you could almost say that too, is like, maybe that's a mark on this book too. Right. If you haven't read Rising Storm, this book won't hit as hard. If you just read this book, if you were just a kid and you were like, well, I'm not going to read the Rising Storm. I'm just going to pick up this, what did you call it? Middle grade reader? Middle
grade reader. Yeah.
Yeah. You just don't have the impact because you don't really know. You're like, the NEEL are attacking the city, but you're like, you know, it's Star Wars, whatever. There's always somebody attacking the planet somewhere, you know? Yeah. And you're not really recognizing how devastating of an attack it is, you know? So I don't know. Last thing that I want to talk about, just as far as the general discussion on the thing, is Ram's purpose. And I want you to get started on it, but I'll say just really quickly, like, I think that Ram obviously went on a journey in this book where he was like, oh, it's a time of peace. This is what I'm going to be when I grow up. I have this idea of what kind of a master I'm going to be, and I'm just going to hang out and do this all this stuff. By the end of the book, he's not only like, I feel like I need to go on these missions, but I think a little bit more like, I want to go on these missions. Yes. Like, it's not like a necessary thing, whereas like throughout the book, it felt like he was kind of trudging through it. Like, multiple times he was like, it was only like yesterday that I was alone in my garage hanging out, and now all of a sudden I'm having my first real fight, and then now I'm on like these creatures, and now I'm rushing back, and it's important. I have to do this because this and that. And by the end of the book, I think he has found his purpose of what I don't know, like his journey, his purpose as a Jedi.
Right.
He's found it. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think you know, summed it up really well. I think the only thing I would add is that, you know, he realizes how he can be of service, you know, to the Jedi and to others in the galaxy. Because he is I think I wrote in my review, he comes across as a very like altruistic Jedi. Like, he's not out to get anyone. He's not out. He just wants to kind of like do what he thinks he's best at. And right now he thinks, and when we meet him, the best thing he can do is sit in a dusty shop and repair droids. And, you know, he has his lightsaber fastened to his vest like it's another tool. And he's totally, that's what he feels. And then these things happen, and, you know, that's disrupted. And by the end of the book, he realizes he's capable of all this. And there's also that push, you know, he kind of pulls Lula back in a way and kind of reminds her to stay in her footing and not get too ambitious, because that's kind of what she struggles with by seeing Vernestra. She wants to be this, you know, Jedi, because Vernestra is not much older than her. And, you know, in the same way that he kind of pulls her back and grounds her in a way, she kind of pushes him forward to be like, look, you know, maybe you're capable of more than you think you're capable of. And when he realizes that, he's like, I am, and I can do that, and I'm going to do that. And he, you know, that's the other thing. He's never, you know, left. I didn't get the impression he's been out in the galaxy very often. So, you know, now we know he's going to be joining them in the High Republic adventure comics. So Daniel Jose Holder gets to keep writing these. So it's cool. Yeah,
that's a good segue too. Where do you think it's all going? Like, do you think that it's just? Do you think we're gonna get more novels with these characters in them?
I do. I definitely think we're going to get more novels with Lula especially, but I could see definitely Ram, and I was just trying to remember the character in A Test of Courage. That is, she's like the mechanic. She's really mechanically inclined. I'm kicking myself that I can't remember.
Abby?
Yeah, Abby. So I think I could see them like meeting at some point too in a story with them. But yeah. So, but I think we'll probably get a good dose of this trio in the High Republic adventures before we see them in like a novel again. I could see them kind of popping up in the future, you know, but there's still like, we're in part 2 of the first wave, and then there's, you know, we haven't even finished this one. There's the second wave, and, you know, next year I think that is when that starts. So we've got a ways to go.
So this is always tricky, and maybe we should actually move this section to the before the spoilers, but I put the for fans of, and when it comes after the spoilers, it's more like if you read this book and you want to read more like it, check out these books. Whereas if we put it before the spoilers, it's more of a, if you think you're interested in this book and you like these other ones that we are about to mention, then you should check out this one. But now, since we're after spoilers, I got vibes from this book. Obviously, Test of Courage. Like, I think that's pretty straightforward. But I also thought Ahsoka would be a good book. That's kind of similar in the sense that I know she is trying to make the decision on whether she wants to fight or not, and it's this group of children that kind of help her to come to that realization. Most Wanted is another like younger reader where it has like Han and Kira, and they're trying to sort out how to it's not their big mission. It's more like a smaller threat that they have to overcome in that particular book. And another one that I haven't thought about in a while, Crash of Fate. And that just to me was like, it was perfect for this age group. I thought that's the best like young reader that I've read, and I just thought anybody who was like a young reader and just enjoyed like a couple of characters and them going on an adventure, like Test of Courage all the way. Did you have some books that kind of were familiar in your head with this one?
Yes, Test of Courage, like yours, like you were saying, and also Crash of Fate. Both of those, I had both of those in my head a lot when I was reading it. I'm glad you said Crash of Fate. And then also Spark of the Resistance, which is by Justina Ireland, which reminded me of that too. Because it's Rey, Rose, and Poe going on a mission together. Absolutely. And so I had a lot of that good energy. And Crash of Fate by Zoraida Cordova, that's one of my favorite Star Wars books. And also Test of Courage is excellent by Justina Ireland. So all right, man. Well, I think that's it for our discussion on this particular book. Again, not a bad book. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Great. Couple faults here and there, but I think we actually had a really good talk about a lot of points in this book. I would say check it out. If you read Rising Storm, you're gonna fly through this thing. I think it's probably like just a couple hours or something like that if you even read it like all the way through. I think, Kyle, you even read it through twice just cuz. I read it through twice. I read it right when it came out, and then I read it a couple days ago before we did this, so I could kind of refresh my memory.
If you did read the book and it's been a long time since you've read it, we also did the What Happened In, where you can just get the basic plot of the story, spoilers and everything, get the plot there. But I think that pretty much wraps up this video. We also did the same thing we had a discussion and a What Happened In for the Rising Storm. That's also on the channel if you guys want to check that out. But like and comment on this video, subscribe if you want to see more, you want to support the channel. We have a lot of fun doing these types of videos for you guys, so hopefully you enjoy it and kind of leave a comment telling us, you watched it or you watched all the way through, or thanks for doing it or whatever. I don't know, whatever you want to say. Or we could just get into a discussion on what happened in the book. Let's talk about it in the chat. As for me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at MyerChunks, and regularly on this channel on the Resistance broadcast. Kyle, where can people find you online?
You can find me at Twitter at KyleDLarson.com, or Kyle D. Larson, not KyleDLarson.com. But
great
Twitter
Twitter
that now. I know. And I also regularly write book reviews and comic reviews for Star Wars Newsnet and contribute to What the Force Show. So check me out there.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you guys in the next video then.
All right. Thanks, everyone.